Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel, wherever you are. It's a good night for us. It's just after sunset here in California, and I'm sure it's something different wherever you are. I'm glad you're here. Tonight, we're going to take up a second adventure with Drew. And Drew's told us a lot about equipment and his big Dob. And it's a platform Dob, so not a true Dob, but how he takes planetary images and got all the equipment. You need to go back and see that show if you haven't seen it already. And then then of course listen to this one because Drew's going to be telling us about how he processes all that stuff that he gets. It's a little different tonight because we had some technical difficulties, but our crack technical team applied themselves, and we hope we're going to see Drew and his presentation tonight. Okay. I am going to share some screen here because I want to tell you about a problem we're having on the Astro Imaging channel. Could you imagine us having a problem? Yeah, it can happen if we're not lucky. This is the problem, okay? If you go to the calendar, you'll see Drew's here tonight, of course, and Yushao is going to be here next week to tell us about how he's put together an observatory and a team of people to they've got a pretty good thing going down there. I saw some previews of the slides and things like that. The week after that, Arno is going to show us the solar system shots. We finally got enough of them, I think. I haven't talked to Arno lately. And then Tim is going to tell us about some really interesting stuff. It says it's going to talk about process and image containers, but he might change his mind because he's got a very active mind, and his active mind has gotten on a new kick, and so he might be telling us something different. We'll see when he gets here. Then we're going to be talking, I think that's Eric, talking about high pass filtering in Photoshop. So we'll have we'll have the video of the solar system shots, and then we'll have Tim and Eric both doing 20-some minute tutorials on some particular topic. Then we've got a lot of cool things coming up, including Richard Wright telling us why guiding needs to die. I think he's being overly dramatic, but he doesn't think so. So let's go roll with it. But then you'll notice we've got open coming up after that. And then after that, we've got open. And then after that, we've got open. And I mean, it just goes on like forever. And there's only one way to cure that. That's to have you decide that you are going to contribute to the Astro Imaging channel besides making comments over on the YouTube page. We need you to step up and volunteer. You all know how to do some fascinating things in Astro Imaging. And you may not be the best in the world, but then again, we aren't the best in the world either. So, well, some of us are actually. Some of us are pretty darn good. But a lot of us are just guys and girls just getting along, trying to do our astro imaging, but we can share things with you and we can help you out and you can help other people out. So please hit the contact button on the astroimagingchannel.org and tell us who you are. Make a comment, tell us what you want to talk about. We'll talk to you a little bit by email and we'll figure out something, okay? So we'll get on that. Be sure to get over here to the YouTube, and over here you can ask all your questions. There's some other things I wanted to point out that I haven't pointed out for a while. You'll notice that we're 12,500 subscribers now, and that's good. The more power comes to us because we have more subscribers. We're able to do different things, and we get certain privileges on YouTube and stuff like that. So I'd appreciate it if you could, please, to go ahead and click that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. Be sure to ask your questions over here if you've got anything you want to ask about, and we'll continue to answer it. Now, let's see if our crack technical team has, in fact, cracked the technical problems that we had while we were getting Drew practiced up for today. Drew, I'm going to stop sharing my screen as soon as I figure out how. Stop sharing and give it to you guys. You guys take over. Molly is showing the slides, and I think Drew is going to be talking about it. So let's go.
All right. We ready?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. This evening, we're going to be processing an image that I captured using my Dobson setup and the capturing software we discussed in last week's show. All right, the next one. Next slide.
Are you having trouble seeing what's on the screen?
Oh, you went too far. Oh, there we go.
And remember, Drew, before we go on, you've got to be watching in the Google Meet room. Don't try to watch it on YouTube, which has its own built-in 15 or 30-second delay. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Now, there are no two astrophotographers that are alike when processing images. Everyone has their own techniques and workflows they use. And this is the way I process my images to get a finished product that I'm pleased with. And I hope that you are able to benefit from this in some way. And next, please. The first two things we'll go over is the SCR video format and the program PIP. They're both located in the same website. As you can see right there, you just Google PIPP Planetary and it'll be the first thing that pops up. And PIP is, I use PIP to center and stabilize my video. And the next one, please. Here's the SCR file we'll be processing. Notice its position in the field of view and its raw, noisy condition it is in. We're going to try to pull a decent image out of this SCR file. Now let me explain a little bit about what we're looking at here on the SCR file viewer. The next one, please. On the A arrow, it's going to be pointing to the single frame tab where you can go backward and forward, frame by frame, either way, forwards or backwards. And the B arrow is pointing to your play, stop, repeat, and directional options you have. And then the C is going to be, the C arrow is pointing to the slider. You can move the slider backwards and forwards real fast to anywhere on the video you want to go to. And let's see, the D arrow is going to be pointing to the region of interest, the bit rate, the Bayer pattern, the frame count, and the current frame location that is featured on this line. And E arrow is pointing to your frames per second, the date, and the universal time location. Okay, next, please. When you open PIP, this is the main page that comes up. And a little bit about the main page. Next one, please. Here's a few arrows here. A arrow, if you're using a single frame or multiple files, you want to make your choice right there. The single one, you just leave it on that top, that batch mode right there. And the bottom one's going to be if you use multiple, the join mode. And the B area there, it's what the kind of planet, if you're going to, what kind of file it is. Is it a planet? Is it the ISS? Is it a close-up of the solar or lunar image? Or if it's the full frame disk. I've never used the last two there, so that's the only four that I've ever used. C is going to be the location you drag and drop your files. When you drop your files in there, in this little yellow area, it's going to show them in there. And then the D is going to be the other data adjustment tabs that we'll be discussing here in a little bit. The next one, please. The first step I take when I'm processing an image is I run my SCR file through PIP, and the purpose of PIP is to center and stabilize every frame to the center of the video. It also will cut out 99% of the frames if a portion of that image falls out of the field of view, which comes in very handy for folks using the drift method on the Dobson telescope, because sometimes they'll drift out of the field of view and you only get like half a planet on there or whatever. Then after I just select the planet there and I make sure it's on batch mode, and then I go up to the processing option tab, which would be the next slide, please. Before we go to the processing options, I'd like to show you a feature that I use often in the second tab named Input Options that we're not using today. If I want to edit my start location or the end location, I can enter it here in these two boxes right here. I just check that box right above it where the arrow A is, and then I'll push like if I want to start at the frame 1 and end at whatever frame I want to, or vice versa. That's about it on this. That's the only thing I really use on this screen right here. But we're going to go ahead and go over to the next screen that we are going to use tonight. Go ahead and go to the next one, please. Okay, yeah, on this page, the only thing I'm going to do is uncheck the cropping tab because it's always checked. Because I want it to stay at the region of interest that it's already on, which is 640 by 480. If I left that crop down, it would cut out almost half the picture. Then after that, I'm going to go over to my output options tab, which would be the next screen, please. Yeah, here I'm going to do two things. This is where I'm going to check the SCR file because this is going to be the output file, what kind of format it's going to be in at the finished product. So I'm going to keep it as an SCR file, and then I'm going to click this WinJupos data. It's going to keep the data in there for if I want to use WinJupos. And that's the only thing we're going to do here. And then I'm just going to go tab over to the next screen, please. The next tab, please. To the beginning screen. Yeah, right here is where I just drag and drop my video file. And when I drag my video file, a window is going to pop up. Go into the next screen, please. It's going to ask you if you want to debayer this video file, and I always check yes. And then on the next screen. And then this is when another box is going to open up. It's going to show you your what your file is going to look like after it's complete. Notice that it's in the middle of the screen there instead of down there on the bottom. And then it'll show you your frame count, and it'll show you your the region of interest. Right there, 640 by 480. And then after I do that, the only thing after I drag and drop and this pops up, the last thing I'm going to do is go over there to the do processing, which would be on the next screen, please, or the next tab, please. And on this one, all I'm going to have to do is push start processing. It's going to take a little while for it to do it, but after it's finished, you'll have a tab come up with your finished product in it, which will be on the next screen, please.
I think you've got a bit of a delay, so just assume that I'm going to the next slide, even if you're not seeing it yet.
Oh yeah, I don't see it yet. No, ma'am.
I've got the slide up with the folder where you're pointing at the video.
Drew, are you looking at YouTube or are you looking at our shared screen in the meeting room?
I'm looking at our screen.
One thing that might be worth mentioning with PIP, and actually with the other programs I think you're going to use, is they're all free.
Oh, all of them are. They sure are.
So it's not like we have to invest in any new software to process these Lucky captured files. Are you seeing the screen yet, too, Drew?
No, sir.
Which screen are you seeing?
I'm seeing the where it says start processing at the do processing tab on the
Okay, how about this? When you say next slide, assume I'm going to the next slide. Do you have a copy of your PowerPoint open so that you know what slide we're on?
Okay, that's a good idea. Hold on.
Yeah, that way you have a slide to look at and just assume that we're on the same slide.
So Molly is on the slide where it shows the folder with the processed.
Yeah, there we go.
File.
All right.
Sorry, I'm trying to get to their spot. Just give me 2 more seconds and I'll be there.
I'll mention to fill the airtime. Some of the things that Pip can do is like, okay, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Now there's the screen that has our finished product from Pip. If you notice right there, the size of the file is 33 gig. And that's what I was talking about last week was how big these files can get at times. And it's a real good idea to have a good storage capacity on your laptop. Then the next screen, please. Then after,
how big was your file when you started, Drew?
I'm sorry, sir?
How big was the file that you started with? And
Yeah,
how
it
big was it?
It was 33 gig as well. So now, I had the first one that was 33, and then this one's going to be new. So you got like 66 gigs right there with the 2 files, just those 2 files alone. Okay, and the next screen is AutoStacker 3. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag and drop the pipped file into AutoStacker 3. Then after I drag it in, which will be on the next screen, is see where this red arrow is down here on the bottom corner there? That's going to be my frame count there on AutoStacker 3. And then when I get that frame count, I'm going to open up my calculator, and I'm going to divide that frame count by 2, which is going to be, if I divide that number by 2, it's going to put me right at 19,267. I'm looking for that middle frame. So over here, where the second arrow is, over here on the other box, it's pointing to where the frame count is, right there where that slider is. And I want to get as close to that 19,267 as I can. Then when I get it there, I'm going to kind of go backwards and forwards, and I'm going to want to get a really good the best detailed image I can get that's really close to this middle to use as a middle frame. And then when I find one I like, I'm going to go right over here to this export, and it says current. It's going to save that one image for me. And the reason I'm saving that image is this is the image I'm going to use in WinJupos for my measurement file. And the middle of the video is going to act like in my neutral position from the beginning of the video to the end of the video, to where all the frames can merge into one for when I start to derotate my my video file. All right, the next one, please. If you look for WinJupos, you can just Google WinJupos, and it'll be the first thing that pops up. Yeah, it's a free software as well. And when you open it up, it's right there. And this yellow one right there on the right. And the next slide, please. And then after you download WinJupos, you're going to want to go down a little bit further down to that jupos.org, the database, and you're going to want to download the current drift charts, and also want to get the current positional data files as well to load up. Can you
explain a bit what WinJupos does?
Oh yeah, sure. It'll take your the planets rotate, and what WinJupos will do, it'll stop the rotation of the whole video, and that's what I was going to use the middle frame in my video. That way, the beginning of my video and the end of my video can all merge into the middle, and it'll everything will be the same. It won't be moving around or anything. All the frames should be the same exact thing. That way you can pull more detail out of it and everything, because it cuts out the rotation of the planet.
It's basically doing the same thing we do when we register stars before align them before we stack them. If things have moved around, and they're going to move on Jupiter, for instance, it unrotates the planet so that things match up, the details match up again.
Yes, sir. All right, the next slide will be WinJupos. Now, when you open it up at first, it really doesn't look like very much at all. It just looks like a blank thing. You're like, what the heck? But it's a really powerful program. And then the next slide will show the first thing I do in there is I'll hit that program tab, and I'll go down to the celestial bodies. And then on the celestial bodies, I'll make sure that the Jupiter is checked there because that's what we're going to be measuring in WinJupos. Then the next slide will show the second thing I do here is I hit that recording button, and then I'm going to hit that image measurement. And then the next slide will show what I do next. The tab will come up that says open image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that image in there that we saved out of Registax 3, that middle frame. So I put that in there, and the next slide will show our image with the little printout of the stencil of Jupiter. Now, the thing about this stencil is what we're going to try to do is put this outlined image of Jupiter and to where it even matches up with the planet here. And we're going to get these lines that are in the middle with the cloud beds in Jupiter as close as we can. But with the Jupiter on WinJupos, you can hit the F11 button or hit this tab right here that my mouse is on, and it'll automatically put it on there for you. But the other planets you try to do like Mars or Saturn or anything like that, you're gonna have to do it manually. That'll be the next tab. Now I took a picture of my keyboard, and these are the directional buttons you can use to move the that stencil or that to measure it up to your planet. You making it larger or making it smaller would be the up and down buttons, and to move it clockwise or counterclockwise will be the N and the P button there. And then of course the directional buttons will be right there with pretty much the directional keys on your keyboard. And the next slide after will show you what it would look like after you push F11. See, it's got the outline on there, and it's kind of showing where the cloud bands are. And also over here on your left, you'll see different things that you can use to help you out for your measurement too that won't affect your image at all. This is for just lining up the two things together to help you with it. You can make it larger, brighter, darker, whatever, even smaller if you need to. Then after I get it all lined up, I go back to the first tab there where it says image, which will be on the next slide. And I save that measurement file to my desktop. And the next slide will show you, there it is on my desktop. It looks just like the icon for WinJupos. It'll show you timestamp and everything. And then what I'm going to do after I
Oh no. He's frozen.
It looks like the internet has taken Drew away from us. Let's see what Drew's going to do.
You may not know, actually.
Molly, what's the next slide?
Let's see. Looks like he's selecting his whole video on the next slide here to import into WinJupos. And then
So he's going to end up with a video file produced by WinJupos, right?
Let's see. It looks like, yeah. So the preliminary image from the original video, I think that's the one he saved out at the beginning. He dropped out, so hopefully he will come back here. Well, while we wait for him to come back, some of the cool stuff that you can do with Pip is you can actually, it'll do a quality estimation for you. In the same way that AutoStacker does, it can also do a quality estimation, and it can cut frames out of your video for you if you want based on that quality estimation. It can also do an alignment of your frames as well. there's a ton of stuff that AutoStacker does. I've never used WinJupos, so unfortunately I can't talk about it a whole lot.
You know, PIP does, in addition to just selecting frames, if you look at it first in AutoStacker, you can get, say, a list of maybe 100 frames in a row, which you want to clip out, and then go into PIP and then clip those out, make a new SER or whatever AVI file, put it back into AutoStacker, and end up with an altogether better image, as opposed to just getting all the best frames out of PIP, which are not necessarily going to line, even though they might momentarily have a higher quality rating. It's a tricky little thing.
Yeah, especially for things like Jupiter, where if you're taking more than like a minute or 2 minute long video, you'll get rotation in there. But if all your frames, if your 100 frames are contiguous, like you said, then you'll have less blurring from rotation. That, I mean, the derotation of WinJupos can only do so much, but I don't really know how good of a job it does. I'll be curious to see. I haven't heard a lot about people who use it.
Well, do you want to go through his presentation? It looks like he's having difficulty getting back.
Sure. Let's see what we can glean from his presentation until he comes back.
Yeah, over on YouTube. Sorry, everyone. Something's happened to Drew's internet, so I think we'll try to go through it until he comes back. Hopefully, he will come back and see whether we can kind of complete what he's doing. So it looks like the next step is starting the derotation, which means aligning the rotation of Jupiter so that basically it isn't rotating. And that's what WinJupos does.
And then it looks like it produces a file.
A derotated file, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we looks like we get the derotated file that he's now going to put into AutoStacker. So AutoStacker, it's another piece of software that is also free, which is great. And other people have used Registax as well, but I've actually found that AutoStacker tends to be a lot less buggy. It's been more recently updated than Registax, which I don't think has been updated since like 2006, I want to say. But yeah, so AutoStacker, it's a nice piece of free software to use. Yeah, so we get.
Why don't you go to the next slide? I actually use AutoStacker a lot, so let's see if I can see what he's doing. So I think the next slide is going to be importing that derotated file of Jupiter into AutoStacker, and that's probably the next slide. So why don't you click the next slide?
Do you want to turn your camera on?
Sure, I can turn. We don't need to see me, but
let's nice to see who's talking, you know?
Okay, so the first thing you got to know about AutoStacker when you bring in, there are videos you might take of a surface, let's say of the sun. I mean, I do a lot of sun videos. So up there in the left, I don't think you can see you see there's image stabilization, either a surface or a planet. So this is a planet, and the stabilization is a lot different for a planet than it is for a surface. So he's checked planets. And then the next thing you do is you want to estimate the quality of the video that you're working with. And so you hit the little analyze button and it analyzes it. And that should be the next slide.
Mute my
hang on a second, guys.
Yep, I'm on it.
As far as I can tell, the YouTube position, I mean, it's still got Drew on it. So the YouTube is still showing Drew.
No, it's moved right along, Alex. It's now pretty well caught up with us.
Okay,
so
now
I think
it's caught up. Okay, we're good now. You're right.
Okay.
So
I think that was the problem.
When you get done, you have this little S-shaped quality curve. And what you're going to try to do when you stack up the frames, however number that you stack up, is you're going to try to take those frames that are the highest quality on the left-hand part of the graph. And that's what AutoStacker is going to do. So it looks like, and I'm just looking back at what he selected, that he's going to take 25% of his total video frames in order to do a stack. Now, there is a lot of variation and discussion about what percent of the video frames you should take to do a stack, but let's follow Drew's presentation and see what he does. And there's his quality curve. And then on the right-hand side, you see a picture of Jupiter, and AutoStacker has kind of selected the best frame that it thinks that you should look as a standard for doing your stacking. And the next thing you want to do, see on the right-hand side, if you can read that, you can place a little grid around the object that you want to stack. And that should be the next slide that he has. Let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And there's, well,
It's
come
a
on,
slide
curtains,
animation.
pull the curtains, pull the curtains. So he has selected and put on, looks like he placed, whoops.
I zoomed in.
So it looks like he had it placed an automatic grid, and you can control the size of the boxes that form that grid. And in this case, he's selected 56 pixels. Now, again, that varies from video to video, but let's just go with what he's done. And then on the next slide, he has said that he's going to stack 22% of the total frames in this capture. And that should be, according to AutoStacker, the best 22% to make a final image. And if you put on your grid and you now hit the little stack button, and he hasn't done, see, it's RGB at 22%, it should go ahead and do a stack. And that must be his beginning stack.
Now
That's
remember,
not a process.
If you've never done planetary imaging before, this is going to look really fuzzy, but we're not done yet. We've still got to do wavelets.
So let's see what happens next. I'm interested.
He is going to do what I do, which is also use Registax.
Okay, Molly, why don't you take a little bit from Registax and I'll jump in.
Sure.
As
All right.
needed.
So although I've mentioned before, Registax is kind of old and buggy, it's still probably the easiest way to do wavelet deconvolution, as far as you just have to go in there and move sliders. So I still use it for wavelets, although you can also use PixInsight and probably some other stuff too. So Registax is another piece of free software. And so it shows you where to download that. Just search for Registax. And this is what Registax looks like. All right, 2011 is when it was last updated, not 2006. So you open that up. You can just click and drag your image into Registax, and it will sometimes prompt you to, it may ask you to, if you want to process in color or black and white. In this case, it's asking if he wants to stretch the intensity levels. Say no, because it oftentimes overstretches, and you can go adjust the curves in the later step of post-processing. All right, so when it loads into Registax, Registax recognizes that it's a single image, so it automatically takes you to the wavelet deconvolution tab. And let's see. All right, it looks like he's actually starting with lining up the RGB before he dives into the wavelets. So over here on the right side of the screen are some other tools in addition to the wavelets that looks like it's going to do imminently. Tools to help you be able to look at the image better, and also to apply a couple of basic functions. So here he's doing RGB balance to balance out the red, green, and blue components of his image, which already look pretty good. He's increased the size of that histogram panel to be able to get a closer look. See, I'm not sure what he wanted to say about that, but yeah, doing a little bit of color balancing, which I think already looks pretty good. Over here on the left is the wavelet deconvolution panel. So I think it automatically loads you into dyadic, but I find that linear tends to work better, and it looks like Drew agrees. And going with a Gaussian instead of default for the wavelet filter. Now, the way that wavelets work is it's basically breaking up the image into different sized components, kind of going from larger pixel groups to smaller pixel groups. In Registax, layer 1 is looking at the larger pixel groups. I don't know if it's like 32 by 32 pixels or what exactly offhand, but this is kind of you're going from gross adjustments to fine adjustments as you step down from layer 1 to layer 6. So I don't usually push mine all the way up to 100, but it looks like it works really nicely with his data. He also had a lot more frames than I usually take. So he puts his layer 1 all the way up at 100%. And also layer 2, it looks like. Now that is starting to come in pretty nicely. What I recommend is, adjust these sliders and to see how it looks. It's really easy to overbake stuff in wavelet deconvolution, but if your data supports it, if you had good seeing that night, you can really kind of push those wavelets up to higher numbers. And it does the same with 3. So okay. So there's a in addition to the sharpening that the sliders adjust, you can also do a bit of denoising as well in this Gaussian mode. So for the denoising, he's using the up and down arrow keys here to adjust the amount of denoising that is done in that layer. And if you couldn't read it, he's got 0.10 for the denoise value, and he's adjusting the sharpness value a bit as well here on layer 1, which has got his 0.110 if you can't quite read the screen. I don't usually do my denoising here in Registax. I usually do it in PixInsight, but there is a denoise/de-ringing tool over here on the right side with the functions with, again, more convenient sliders. And when you denoise and when you do these wavelets, because now he looks like he's moved layer 4 up to 100% as well, you can kind of get some dark circles around things, and that's where the de-ringing can help reduce those kind of problems. And I used to get white circles around my DSLR planetary images, and looks like it has some adjustment for that as well. Although he didn't have that issue with this data set. So you can also rotate your image here to get to the angle that you find most pleasing using the flip and rotate function, again, over here on the right side. And just by clicking and dragging this tool in a circle, you can set it exactly where you would like to have it. More pretty animation. Yeah, so once you've made all of your adjustments that you want to make, then up in the...
Molly,
yes,
can we before we go on to the do all?
Yeah.
If you look on the internet, the people that do this kind of imaging, you will find that everyone has their own little set of denoise, sharpening, and settings over here on this left-hand column. And it's probably worthwhile to go see how some of those setups work for your particular capture if you're doing these kind of planetary imaging. Are these the best ones? Well, they seem to work for this data, but other ones might work better for the data that you capture. So I actually, if you look at the bottom, you see there are some available schemes. We can't actually click that. So once you have a set of settings that work for you or for your set of data, you can name them and you can save them, and then you can call them up all at once without having to remember or to write them down. So this might be, say, Jupiter 1, or you might have one for Mars, or you might have a totally different one if you're doing a surface image. So why don't we go on to the dual?
Yeah, so once you've got all your settings set up here in the upper left, it's not actually saved to, it's not really applied to the image until you hit the do all button, and then it goes through and actually applies it to the image, which then allows you to save it, which is probably his next step here. Yeah, save image. And you can choose what format to save in. Usually out of here, I'll save it as a FIT or a TIFF file for further processing. And just choose where you want to save it and what format. And then for some additional prettification and color balancing, he goes to Photoshop. So Photoshop is the one app in this presentation that is not free. But you can get Photoshop and Lightroom as a combo package for $10 a month if you don't already have Photoshop. It's a nice tool for doing all kinds of image processing, from deep sky to daytime to planetary here.
Actually, yes, he shows on the left that you could purchase Photoshop. And I don't think you can purchase Photoshop anymore. It's all done on monthly or yearly licensing.
In addition to Photoshop, there is sort of a free variant of Photoshop called GIMP that it's not as powerful as Photoshop, but it has a lot of basic functions for doing things like messing with colors and histogram and saturation and contrast and things like that, that you can use in place of Photoshop for some functions. All right, so he's opened up Photoshop here. Do you want to talk about Photoshop, Eric?
Well, I'm not sure what he's doing in Photoshop, but why don't we go through a couple of
Yeah.
slides and see?
What he's got going on. Okay, he's got a plugin.
Oh yeah, so the first thing he's doing, there's an add-on to Photoshop called, that's really a takeoff of what they do in PixInsight.
Yeah.
And it's called Hasta La Vista Green, and it's a free add-on, and you just click it. So he's decided that Jupiter shouldn't be green, and so by clicking this button, he can remove some or all or not a lot of the green. So he clicks OK, and we should see the next image.
It looks
Less
like
green.
It looks like this add-on was written by Rogelio. Oh my goodness.
It was?
Wait, back in 2010.
Oh yeah, there it is, 2010.
That's amazing.
But based on the PixInsight, SCN, is it SCNR? The
Yeah,
SCNR
SCNR, yeah,
function.
which does the same thing.
Now we have a bluer Jupiter.
Yeah.
What is he?
Oh boy.
TK Lumas. I don't know what that is.
Shoot. Okay. I'm not familiar with this tool. I wonder if it's another plugin.
I'm not sure about that. Why don't we go on to the next one?
Yeah, see what he's got here. All right. Curves. We understand curves.
Yeah, we understand curves. And actually curves in Photoshop is really not much different than curves in GIMP or curves in PixInsight. And it's just adjusting the intensity of certain parts of your histogram more than others to bring out certain features. And I would say in this case, this is really a touchy-feely kind of adjustment. I don't think there's any right or wrong way, but the S curve that you see here is pretty typical for a curves adjustment.
Yeah, it looks like he's chosen the increased contrast preset, and it looks like he is doing it as a luminance mask is probably what that previous step was.
Let's see what's next, Molly.
Yeah. Saturation.
You want a little more color in your image?
Yep, always.
Actually, there's hue and saturation, but there's also another selection called vibrance.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't know exactly what vibrance does, but it makes the colors more vibrant.
I think it's like the C component of when you have an LAB space, like in PixInsight where you can change RGB and also A, B, and C. It's like the C component. It's sort of similar to saturation, but somehow a little different, having to do with
actually, guys.
Well, vibrance will also. I'm sorry,
yeah,
Tim, you got
Tim.
something?
Yeah, I can actually speak to that a little bit.
Cool.
A vibrance adjustment is a saturation adjustment that does not clip highlights. So vibrance increases your sats, but it's much more protective of highlights than it is midtones and shadows.
We learned something new today. What's next?
Thank you. Merging as layers.
Okay, so well, we can't see that here, but behind that is the layers palette. So as he makes these adjustments, there we go. As we make these adjustments, you have a series of layers, some of which are destructive and some of which it looks like in this case are non-destructive. So you usually keep the whole layered file to make sure if you want to go back and change something without being destructive, you can. But in the end, when you want a flat image to export, you flatten the image. It should be the next slide.
So we've done that with merge visible.
Merge visible.
You can also go up to layer and merge visible, or flatten image is also available up in the layer menu.
I actually call that stamp. Makes a stamp. So you can also merge visible and make it another layer on top of whatever is visible, and then use that for as an intermediate process and maintain your layers. Anyway, what's next?
Export.
What did he export?
Exporting as a PNG. I think it's looking oversaturated on the screen here. It probably isn't actually that oversaturated in real life. I think he's taking pictures of the screen with his phone as opposed to taking screenshots here, which is why they look a little weird.
And of course, you can export as a PNG, as a GIF. If you want to say put it on the internet, you can export it as any particular file that you have an interest in, depending on what you want to do with it. Put it on a website. And what's next?
It looks like he's using this to add his watermark. Yes, so Photoshop took away the ability to add watermarks in an easy way. I use Lightroom, and it's still a bit of a pain to make watermarks in Lightroom. So it looks like he's using a third-party program on his phone to add his watermark. And
it's easy to put a watermark in there. Basically, all you do is click on the text layer, type in whatever you want to, and then when you do a stamp, then your information is there.
Can you save like a template of your text so you don't have to reset the font?
Yeah, I do that all the time.
Okay.
Right. Every image, I use the same one over and over again. It's basically a text layer. It can be flattened out, or it can just be text, because sometimes your images are different sizes and you want different size marks on it, or copyright notices.
I didn't use Photoshop in the first place because I could not get the font size large enough. It didn't allow me to go to a large enough font size to actually see it in my images.
You can actually take any font layer and enlarge it just like any other bit of.
That's true. It also be a vector image at that point, I suppose. All right, and this is his completed image.
Beautiful.
Got a lot of nice detail there. You can see some of the other storms. And there's no great red spot in this image, but there's other storms to look at here. A lot more than just kind of your basic cloud bands, more of the sub bands and the equatorial things. I don't know what all the Jupiter name things are. But yeah, lots of cool features here.
Is that the last slide, Molly? Oh, not quite.
Merch. He's got merch. I think he's wearing a different T-shirt tonight, but he's got his image of Saturn printed on a T-shirt. I think is what he's got here with. I think that must be one of his images.
So we're sorry something happened to Drew's internet, but hopefully we've done more merchandise. A reasonable job of presenting what he's done. And
so he's got a YouTube channel that you can go to with a really long URL. I'll copy that into the chat. And also his Facebook page as well. I'll copy that into the chat as well.
Cool.
So we made it.
And we're stopping sharing. Molly, it's a good thing you had his presentation. Otherwise.
Yes, that worked out.
Alex, back to you.
I'm dumbfounded. That was a real tour de force. I don't think we've ever lost a presenter in the middle of a show.
Yeah.
I think we have, but I don't think we've ever taken over a presentation from.
Yeah, you guys are probably going to be sued for copyright infringement.
Yeah, probably, but we'll live with that.
Was so okay. Built out, we were able to figure it out.
All teasing aside, it really is amazing that we've got people around here, Eric and Molly in this case, and I think a couple of others could have jumped in here too, that can actually just step into these things and continue to explain it. Drew did a marvelous job. We had a few comments there about how detailed he was getting and how well he was showing off things. And it's just absolutely a shame that the internet snuffed him out. And you know what? I don't know that he knows yet that he's out. But
might not know.
He might be talking away at his. Yeah, if he watches YouTube, he probably realizes what's going on.
At any rate, I want to thank everybody here who pulled off what they did pull off. Now, let's go back and be traditional. There was a question early on about what camera was he using, and I'm sorry, I don't recall what camera he was using.
He talked about it
went into detail last week about which camera it was. Does anybody in the room remember what camera it was, or can you?
No, but there was something interesting about the camera, which is probably worthwhile noting. he had a very fast frame rate camera, because I was noticing he was getting like 400 frames per second, which means he probably had a small sensor and then cropped it down. And actually having a very fast camera makes for very nice lucky imaging, because if you take these big frame cameras and they only go 20, 30 frames per second, it's not much you can do. But you can stop the atmosphere from jiggling as best you can with a very fast camera. I think it was an ASI, but I'm not exactly sure.
Terry thinks, it was the ZWO 174, the mini, I think.
Yay.
That's what Terry just posted in the chat.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure the 174 will go that fast, but maybe.
Yeah, Frank Rossetti. Okay.
The mini has USB 3, I think, on it, or USB-C, one of the two. I think he's got the USB 3 model of it.
Well, if it is the 174, I can tell you the 174, if you're looking to do lucky imaging, whether it be planetary or surface, the 174 is really a good choice, and it's probably the sensor of choice for that kind of imaging.
Chandrasekhar wanted to know if this is what we do with LRGB imaging, and I answered him that in general, one doesn't do LRGB imaging with the planets.
That's not true.
Pardon?
Oh, Molly does, huh?
Well, no, I'm not. I'm saying in general. I'm not saying it isn't done or it can't be done, but because. Go ahead, Molly.
With Jupiter, it's generally better to do it in color just because it rotates so quickly. But I have always consistently gotten better results doing monochrome, just because you have a higher spatial resolution, being able to use every pixel instead of every other pixel, every like quad of pixels. So the way that I process that is this, just like this. But then I combine the three color images, RGB and sometimes a luminance channel or an infrared channel, using PixInsight or Photoshop or mainly those two. And actually, AutoStacker, if you put in, like, let's say you do your red channel first, if you load in your green right after, it will align them in the same place. And if you put in your blue afterwards, it'll align them in the same place. So your images generally come out already lined up out of AutoStacker, which is really clutch. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to add to that. So if you're doing something like Mars, you're probably better off. We'll get a better image if you can do an LRGB image and then put them together. Jupiter, I don't really think that's possible with the rotation speed. As far as other planetaries, well, I mean, I don't really know about Saturn, but I do know that Mars works pretty good as LRGB.
Saturn too, because there's not really any recognizable surface features that you would see rotating. And in fact, that's why we had a really hard time figuring out what the orbital period of Saturn is, because there's no surface features to track. So it works great with Saturn. I have done it with Jupiter, but you have to take very short stacks, like using extremely high frame rates, and be really quick on your filter changes in order to do it. I have done it. I've gotten some nice results, but you have to be fast about it and be pretty much sitting out there with your telescope. Or however.
Well, I think if you do that, you can use your luminance image in WinJupos as your alignment image for your RGB.
Okay. The other part of what Chandrasekhar was asking, judging by when he asked that question, if you were doing LRGB, what they showed you about AutoStacker and Registax essentially comes to the same thing.
Yes.
And you wind up with 4 different images. If you're doing LRGB, you wind up with 4 different images, and you go ahead and combine them just as you would when you were doing deep space processing. It's basically the same kind of thing. But quite often today, with the power of color cameras we've got, people have been doing it in color as much as anything else. Well, and with Jupiter, it's really important to do that.
Let me just add one thing. I think when we're doing DSO images, we're taking long images. And if you look at the histogram of any capture, there's really nothing there. We have to stretch I can't say the word out of it in order to get something of interest. If you're doing lucky imaging, those objects are bright. So a color camera, it really works quite well in most cases, especially a contemporary color camera like a new 174 or 178. You got plenty of light. They're bright. So you don't need the luminosity in order to bring out, color detail that's really faint.
Yeah, I've used in fact, I found that luminance channel can actually degrade the image because of the way that the atmosphere interacts with the shorter wavelengths like blue and green. I've actually gotten a lot of success out of using an infrared filter, my photometric infrared filter, as the luminance channel, because the atmosphere disturbs the infrared light a lot less. You get a lot less of that atmospheric turbulence in infrared. So my sharpest image tends to be my infrared images. So that's kind of an interesting tactic I've seen.
Yeah, nice tip.
Well.
Nice tip.
But
so you're using a near infrared?
Yeah, it's like it covers like 900 to 1100 nanometers. It's meant for regular CCD cameras that are sensitive out to that range.
So that's an NIR.
Yes.
NIR filter.
Yeah, and actually this one in particular is a Johnson Cousins photometric filter, but there are like near IR filters that are not photometric as well. But the photometric one works great. So
good tip. I like that.
It was kind of interesting to mess around with that.
Okay, we did it. Eric and Molly did it. Everybody helped out a little bit. I just wish Drew could have stayed with us and the internet would have worked out for him. We did use his slides, and I'm glad that we had worked that out. Next week, Yusho will be here. Yusho Shen will be here telling us about his collaboration to build a dream observatory in Texas, someplace. So I hope you all come back next week, and it'll be Easter, but we will be here because it's 9:30 at night, and most Easter activities are pretty much done by then. So anyway, come back. See you next week, and thanks everybody for being here. Tim, I think you're in charge, so you can take us out.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in there with us.